Hi folks, and welcome to another build video that we're going to do, a tutorial, and this is for a new Silent Mini ITX motherboard. It's passively cooled, so it doesn't have any moving parts on the motherboard itself, and it's a pretty powerful build considering it's passively cooled. And we're going to be using the all new Chameleon Commodore 64x Blue. So this is it. So you can see this is brand new, only delivered to me a couple of days ago. You can see the back, the sides, and the top there, and it's got a carry handle. So I'm very chuffed with this, super stoked to get on with this build. So let's crack on. Okay, so this is pretty much one of the easiest builds you can do with a Commodore 64X on the Mini ITX front. So what we're going to do is just walk you through what's needed in this build. So we need an M.2 solid state drive. For this build I'm going to use a 250 gigabyte hard drive, M.2 hard drive. Then we're going to need some RAM. In this instance I'm using a 16 gigabyte stick of DDR RAM. Then we're going to need you don't have to use this, you can use a DVD slimline 12.7mm DVD drive, but we're going to use the hard drive docking station that is available, will be available on our website, or for those of you that's actually purchased one through the campaign, you get the hard drive docking station, a cable, and you get 4 screws to screw it in. Then we need the most important component, or the second most important component, and that is the N100DC-ITX Mini ITX motherboard from ASRock. And you can see it in there. We'll open that up in a sec. And then finally we need the power supply. All this will be listed in the description of the video. Tools, we need a pair of side snips for cutting the cable ties, or a pair of scissors, that will do. A medium-sized Phillips screwdriver, and I like this. You don't really need it, but it is handy sometimes for fiddly screws. And this is a very small screwdriver. I don't know if you can actually see that if the camera zooms. I don't think it can. But anyway, so those are the parts that we need. Oh, nearly forgot. And the most important part of all is obviously the Commodore 64X, and in this instance it's the Chameleon Blue. So the first thing we want to do is prep the motherboard before we actually put it in to the Commodore 64X. So we're going to take the leaflet, the instructions for the motherboard out. We're going to take some cables out that's in here, and the back plate, put them to the side, and I'm going to take this out. What I'm going to do is close this up and leave it there to work off. So the next thing I want to do is take this out of the case. So this is the Mini ITX motherboard. Now one thing to note, and I always say this straight away, the underside of this is really sharp. So the best thing to do with these is not to put them direct onto your work surface, because if you do that it's going to scratch it. So at the very least I always use the anti-static mat that it comes with, and I put it on the anti-static mat. Now you can do it direct on the work surface, but I find doing it on the actual box that the Mini ITX motherboard came in raises it up towards you and makes it that much easier to work on. So now we've done that, the first thing we're going to do is actually install the RAM. So here we have the stick of RAM, and if you can see, I use my screwdriver for a pointing device. You can see that the actual the slot in this RAM is offset, And the reason it's offset is to help you put this RAM in round the right way. And effectively, it means that it cannot be put in wrong. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring this down and we're going to line it up to make sure the slit or the slot here is in line with the little post, which it is. So then what I'm going to do is slot this down, and then you can grasp hold of the actual Mini ITX board, and using your hands, your fingers underneath and your thumb, you can click it into place. Listening to this click, ready? And that is clicked in. There's a little lever here that once it clicks in, that lever pops up and locks it in place. So that is the RAM installed into your motherboard. The next thing we're going to do, and this is a little bit more fiddly, is install the M.2 hard drive. Now you could have a different hard drive. This is a Samsung, and again this is a 250 gigabyte. You could have anything up to a 2 terabyte. I think you can buy in these now. Now what we need to do is, now this, on this particular motherboard, if I use my pointing device, it slots in here towards the back of the, in a motion going this way towards the back of the Mini ITX motherboard. But what we have to do first is there is a screw in here, and I'm using my small screwdriver to undo this. I'm just going to undo the screw and remove that, and then what I'm going to do is locate this. Before I do, just to let you know that again, like the RAM, this has got a slot and it's offset for exactly the same reason as the RAM is offset, to enable you not to put this in upside down. So that would be an upside down. We need to put it around this way, and the slot, if you can actually see it, is just here where I'm pointing, the little post. So to make sure that that is lined up, and then I'm going to raise this up around about 25 degrees, so it's not flat. And then I'm just going to use a rocking motion, put a little bit of force towards the back of the Mini ITX motherboard and click it in. Now, if you note that this is still sticking up at 25 degrees, but it's in, we need to just put the fixing screw in and push it down to where it goes, and then put the screw in. Now, it is quite fiddly with these screws, especially if you haven't got a magnetic screwdriver. I've got a magnetic screwdriver, so the screw can fit on the end, and even with that, if you've got a shaky hand, it's quite fiddly. So I'm going to take time and guide this in. And you can see it is quite fiddly. Normally I'd do this first go. There we go. And then when you do it up, you just want a slight pinch. You don't want to over tighten this, because if you do that, you might strip the threads and break something. I'm just going to use my bigger screwdriver just to make sure that that is tightened right up, and it is. Again, you just want a little pinch. You don't want to over tighten it too much. Now for this build, that's it, because there's one more thing that you can fit. We're not doing it in this build because I haven't got a spare Wi-Fi card. You can fit a Wi-Fi card in here, and it fits in the same way that the M.2 hard drive did. It slots in and then screws in here, and you get an extra screw with the kit in a bag for you to do this, but I haven't actually got the Wi-Fi to fit that in on this particular build. So that's built. Believe it or not, that is a working computer. If you connected this to the power and plugged in a mouse and a keyboard and your HDMI cable, you could connect this to a monitor and this would actually work. It's ready, it's done, it's that simple. So let's move on and put this into the Commodore 64 case. Okay, so here we have the the famous Commodore 64X, and what we're going to do now is open this up. So this is the bare bones, and we're just going to, this is a very heavy duty case, made of quite thick cardboard, and sometimes it takes a bit of manoeuvring to get this open. And as you can see, we've got "Welcome to the world of friendly computing," like you get on the original Commodore 64 from the 1980s. I just want to show you this as well. So if I open this one up, you can actually see it's there as well. That's where we got the idea from, and we've tried to mimic that as close as we can. So let's bring this down, open this up, and what you can see here is the manual, and I just want to bring over an original American manual, and as you can see, we've tried our best to make this as similar as we can. You can turn it over to the back. You can see it's pretty similar that way, and even on the first few pages it's pretty similar. So you can see we've tried to do our utmost to keep the theme of the Commodore throughout this build, this case. So we're going to take that user manual out, because that's going to come in handy, because it helps you and gives you advice on how to build your very own Commodore 64 modern PC. In the back here, if we open this up, we have the kit, which comprises of cable ties, panel mount, cable tie mount, sorry, fixing screws for the motherboard, and all sorts of other things as well. So there's an assortment of screws in there, so we need those. So let's put that to the side, close that back up, and then for transit, the actual case has got a protective bit of cardboard and an elastic band, and that's just protecting the keycaps to stop them coming off in transit, because the fact that this is a mechanical keyboard with keycaps that can be removed, they can come off in transit, so that's why we do that. So if we open this up, there is the amazing all new Commodore 64 Chameleon, and it is a nice solid, considering it's empty at the moment, it's really heavy. It is a really nice, well made retro case, and I hope those of you that are building this and following this guide, I hope you don't throw these boxes away, because there is so much work that's gone into these boxes. They should be stowed away or used to carry this amazing computer around when you move it around. Okay, so let's take the top off, which should come off relatively easily. The first thing we're going to do is install the hard drive docking station into this storage cradle. Now I just want to explain something. Now I've had to take the original storage cradle out, which is this one, and the reason I've had to do that is because we have an old hard drive docking station, a revision 1, and they've changed it since then, and unfortunately, because this is a revision 1, it won't fit into the current version of the storage cradle itself. It won't fit, it's not compatible, so I've had to revert to an old one, which is why this is a metal colour. But the actual Commodore 64X did come with this black one. It's still going to be exactly the same. It won't be no different for you. It's just that you're going to have the new version of this. Anyway, so we've got 4 fixing holes. 1, 2, 3, 4. They've got a thread in them, so that all we need to do is put screws in to screw them up. So what I'm going to do is, on the actual storage cradle, we've got 4 corresponding holes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're just going to line these up. We're going to slot this down. Now, it's going to be a bit easier for me because I've got a silver storage cradle, but obviously yours are going to be black. So I've found it's quite difficult to line the holes up because everything's black, holes are black. But you know, it's just one of those little fiddly things. So I'm going to get my screws from the kit, and I'm going to screw this storage cradle in. And again, it's a little bit fiddly, but we'll get there. Originally, we used to have to take the storage cradle out, and I think in the manual it does say to take the storage cradle out. It's 4 screws underneath to do that, but you really don't need to do that anymore. You can install, if you're installing a hard drive docking station, that is. If you want to install a DVD drive, you still have to take the storage cradle out because it's quite involved. Right, so that's done. Now, a golden rule, and I always say this and then I always go on to do it wrong. A golden rule when fixing screws into anything is never tighten them up until all the screws are in. Because if you tighten 2 screws up, you won't be able to move this to get the other holes in. So it's always best to just put them in and just put a few turns on them so they're actually in, but they're not tight. And then you can still manoeuvre the storage cradle round to line the holes up to put the other 2 in. So that's a good tip there. Always, and I think I've got the tip in this manual as well, never do them up until you've got all the screws in place, then you can proceed to tighten them up. So that's the storage cradle in. Now we're gonna go and put the motherboard in place. Right, we're ready to fit the motherboard. So what we're going to do now, the first thing is we're going to get the rear I/O shield. You can see here. I happen to know that putting it in this way, like that, down, is the correct way round. But it's always best to line it up with the motherboard that's going to go in, so we know that it's going to fit. And the other good thing is doing this, you can make sure that there's no tags in the way, because there's tags on the back. If I hold it like that, you'll see the tags. Bring it down, and if you put the tag, if the tags are in the way, they're going to block the path of any cables being plugged in. So we want to make sure that they're out of the way. They are. So I'm going to slot this in. It slides down in a groove that's down the edge there, and then I'm going to bring in the motherboard. You might have to move some cables out of the way to do it. And then what we're going to do is line this up with the holes on the back of the I/O shield, and then I'm going to get the screws. Now the screws are identified in the manual, but it's these little screws. There's 4 of them, so they're the fixing screws for the motherboard. And we're going to do the same thing as what I said earlier on. We're not going to do them out all the way. We're just going to put them in a couple of turns, so that we can get them all in one. But also there's another reason why we want to do this, and I'll explain in a sec. I just want to get these in first. Last one. Right, and the reason why I don't want to do them up, apart from what I already mentioned, is I want to push the motherboard up against the rear I/O shield as far as I can get it. So can you see that motion I'm doing there? So it wants to be up tight against the rear I/O shield. So I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to hold it in that motion, in that forward motion. And then when I do these up, the motherboard screws, once you feel it pinch, you just give it a little pinch. You don't want to tighten it too much, because you'll strip the threads of the bottom half of the Commodore 64 case. So we just want a little pinch. So the next thing we're going to do is connect the cables. So what I want to do is zoom in a little bit so you can actually see a bit more what I'm doing. So if we just move the chassis fan cable out of the way, so we've got the 2 cables that come from the hard drive docking station. So we've got the SATA cable here, and this has an L-shaped socket within the plug. And if we go to the SATA plugs on the actual motherboard, there's 2 here, 1, 2. You'll see that there's a corresponding L-shaped post. So we've just got to match that up and then just push it down and click it into place. Now you should hear, I'll try and do this carefully so you hear a click. You ready? ever such a slight click, but there was one. We know that's in place, and pure luck here, this has got a nice sort of like spring in it so that we can tuck that underneath the docking station. So then we've got the SATA power. So what we want to try and do is do the same thing and slot that underneath there. Now this goes here. We can actually see there's a little bit of right in there that says SATA power. So we know that that's the power to the SATA, which is here. Now this has got two posts on it. On this, I don't know whether you can actually see that. If I turn it at an angle, you might be able to see them. And there's two corresponding gaps in this rectangle shaped plug, two grooves. So we can plug that in. Basically, it basically means that it only goes one way. It won't go another way. So we can push that in. That's pushed all the way down now. So I'm pretty happy with the way that these cables are going, because without much cable management, they look pretty neat. The next thing we're going to do is the USB 2 plug cable that goes to the sorry, not USB 2, USB 3 plug, which goes to the two USB 3s on the side ports. Now we're using an L-shaped socket. You see it's an L-shaped. Now there are straight sockets, right? But the trouble then is if you plug it in, by the way, this here is the USB 3 socket on the motherboard. But if you have a straight one, it tends to stick up in the air too far, and it comes right up here before it bends. And the trouble then is as it comes up, it's pushing up on the keyboard, so we don't want that. So we decided when building the Commodore 64Xs to use an L-shaped 90 degree, but that comes with problems as well, because what we have then is it's facing the wrong way, so we've got to turn it around this way. Now the reason being is they only go one way, but we want to make sure that this is going into this USB 3 socket in the correct position. And again, this has, I don't know whether you can see it, but it's got a little post, or a little post there, and on the corresponding block here we've got a groove in it, so it only goes round that way. So what we want to do is, although these cables are quite, shall we say, strong, they are pliable. You can sort of like bend them and move them so that they actually do your will. So we want to put it in that way. We've done that. So how neat does that look? That's so neat. There's only one more thing to do, and that is the chassis fan. So with the chassis fan, you've got a couple of options here, because we don't really need it, because the chassis fan's going to create a certain amount of noise for this build, although you can go in the BIOS and you can either turn it off or turn it down so it's not going very fast, thus it won't create much noise. So if you don't have the chassis fan connected, we could for instance push this in there out the way, maybe put a cable tie so it doesn't work its way across something and short something out. Best thing maybe to tie it onto these cables so it can't move. We could do that. Or we could actually go, no, I really do want this connected. I want to be able to have it connected and change the settings in the BIOS to what I want. So that's what I want to do. So I'm going to feed the wires through, and this post here is the chassis fan post. And again, to help you plug this in, it's got identifiers to tell you where it goes. So we've got two posts on here, and we've got a large post on here on the actual socket, and it's like a guide to actually slide this down and slot it into place. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to rock it in a rocking motion until I get it all the way down. And because the plug's white and the base socket's black, it'd be quite nice to take a picture of this so you can actually see, because it's very easy to work that out. There's one more thing to do now for this build to be completely finished, and that's connect the top half. So let's do that now. I've zoomed out here, so for a reason. So I've got the Commodore 64X manual there if I need to consult that. I've got the manual here to the motherboard, and I am consulting that at the moment. And I've zoomed out so you can see where in relation to the bottom I'm putting the top half of the case. And the most important thing is I'm putting the static foamy thing that come with the motherboard there, and then I'm turning the case upside, the top half of the case upside down, so it's protecting the keys, and then I'm placing it back to back alongside the bottom half of the case, which gives me access to these wires so I can work out where they're going to go. So I'm going to now zoom back in so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is, after consulting the manual, I now know that this connection, this block of posts here, is the front panel connections, which is what we want. And the first thing I'm going to do is put the LED plus and minus in, and I've got these. So the plus is this side. Let me use my little pointing device. The plus is there, the minus is there, and it's in correlation to where the motherboard manual is telling me where to put them. And then the power switch goes in the same row, but to the rear of them, sorry, to the front of them, towards the front of the case. Don't worry, I will take a photograph of this. Okay, so the last thing to plug in is the USB keyboard. This is probably where you could easily come unstuck and plug it in round the wrong way. So you really do, we've got lots of information again in the manual about this, but you really do need to pay attention, because again, you've got the USB 3 here, which cannot be plugged in around the wrong way. USB 2, they haven't changed it in years, and it is very easy to plug this in, one, into the wrong socket completely, and two, you can plug it in round the wrong way. So you need to pay attention. I've consulted the manual, and I've also consulted the Commodore 64 bare bones user's guide to know where to plug this. Now, one of the things you need to know is where the plus and where the ground is. So the plus is the red wire, which is this one, and it always has a little triangle embossed onto the actual pin, and then the black is the ground. So in consulting the motherboard manual, I can actually see that the plus is at the top. And what we need to do is, you always have, with these keyboards, you have one cable that's not used. So we've got 5 pins, but we've only got 4 cables. 1, 2, 3, 4. So one of them, we call it the no pin position. So that has to go over the no pin position on the USB. So we've got two USBs here. We've got 1, 2. So we can use either one. But we've got to make sure that the no pin position is in the no pin position. So if we do that, we can't go wrong. So can you see, there's the no pin, and there's no pin. There is no pin there. So if we plug it in around that way, we cannot go wrong. If we use the no pin to our advantage, we cannot go wrong. So that is the actual build pretty much complete. Everything's in place now. All we need to do is a little bit of cable tidiness, and all I'm going to do is just run a couple of cable ties around these. So let's do that now. So we have the bag that came with all the screws, and we've got some cable ties in here and some cable clamps, or whatever you call them. But because the build's so tidy, I don't really need to do much. All I want to do really is, I think this could do with a couple, or one round this. And this is just, we call it cable management, and it's just, cables can move. If the the case is dropped or something like that, they can move. Again, when you cut these, make sure you don't accidentally cut the cable. And I'm just going to put one round here and just tidy all these up. Can I do that as well? Should I? Let's put the keyboard one in amongst them as well. I'm not going to do them up too tight. Just you know, they're relatively loose really. But I'm happy with everything else. And what I'm going to do is, as I bring this top half of the case over and clamp it down, I've got to make sure that the cables don't get in the way of anything. So I can sort of like manually move the cables, because what we don't want to do is make any cable go over these 6 posts, because we could accidentally put a screw through the cable if we do that. Now this build is pretty easy because we haven't got any moving parts. If we had moving parts, for instance, we might have to route the cables in a different way, although we haven't got much scope with the USB, but we might have to route it in a different way. But anyway, so let's bring this over, and what I want to do is route these cables as I bring them over into a position. You might even have to go down low to make sure, and I can see that that's pretty good. So I'm going to slot this down, and when we do this, you just want to make sure that the rear I/O shield is in the correct place, which it is now. Did you hear it click in? So the rear I/O shield's clicked in, and the front's in. So if we have a look at that now, I'm very happy with that. So all that's left to do now is put the 6 screws in. And again, I'm going to bring that in and put the keyboard onto that. And I'm going to get the 6 screws that came with the case, and I'm just going to drop them in one at a time. Now, one thing you might want to do, and one missing, that comes with not putting them in a pot to start with. We'll worry about that in a minute. But what you might want to do is actually, before you screw this up, is test it to make sure you get the BIOS come up. I'm just going to screw this up and trust my judgment to know what I'm doing. So I'm one screw missing. I'll sort that out in a minute. I don't know what I've done with that. I've probably dropped it on the floor. But anyway, there we have it. So all that's left to do now is actually turn this on and see if it actually works. So let's do that now. So I'm going to press the power button, and we have, hey presto, we have a green LED light because this is a chameleon. So we know the light works, and hopefully any second now we're going to see the ASRock logo, which we do, and then that should straight away go into the GUI of the BIOS. And there we have it. So we know it works. It's actually showing that it's got the 250GB Samsung M.2 SSD hard drive, and then it also shows that it's got the 16GB DDR RAM installed. So this is ready for an operating system to be installed upon it, which we will cover in another video. Well, I hope you enjoyed that build. I did. It was very simple to do. And one of the things that made it even more simple than normal is the fact that this has onboard power, and it's something I forgot to mention during the build. So you don't need a Pico PSU, and the power, if I just look at the power input, is here. So it made the build even more easy to do. So this is the first, hopefully of many, the first Commodore 64 Chameleon. This is the blue one. This is my daughter's computer, and there's one more thing I need to do to this before she gets it, and that is install Windows 11. So what we're going to do is take the opportunity of doing another tutorial to show you guys how to install Windows 11. That's going to be the very next video after this, and it's very simple to do, and it doesn't cost that much doing it the way that we're going to show you how to install it. legit. Everything's legit on it. It's going to be very easy to do. And when we do that build, I'm going to test this and see how powerful it is, because it's a lot more powerful than the J5040 that we did. Our partners, miniitx.com, are saying to me the easy way to describe it is it's as powerful as a Core i5 Intel i5 processor, or no, I'll say that again, Intel i7 processor from about 5 years ago. So it's a pretty powerful setup, and it's several times more powerful than a Raspberry Pi. So, but that's everything we're going to talk about in this tutorial. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.